Hello there, Dr. Lepora here. Hope that you are safe and well. The question, the inquiry I often get is exactly how much of a scope of diversity and equity and inclusion should an organization take on at a time? And let me just point out, diversity, equity, and inclusion are all three very distinct concepts within themselves, related, complementing each other, but different. And of course, that could be a masterclass in itself. That being said, the answer is it depends. And there are various factors that goes into that, and we're going to talk about that today. So again, we want to often ask ourselves, can we even boil the ocean of diversity, equity, and inclusion? When we know that there is a good thing, we want it immediately. It makes good business sense. It's good for our customers, good for our organization. And so when we know that it's a good thing, we tend to want it all immediately. And so the answer to that is yes, we can boil the ocean, but not all at once. And yes, that may sound somewhat contradictory or like an oxymoron, but the fact of the matter is that diversity, equity, and inclusion are concepts, are goals that are so important that you want to keep a line of sight of those even aspirational goals at all times within your organization. So in that sense, you want to keep your line of sight on that ocean, so to speak, on that entirety of potential opportunity, while biting one chunk at a time. And that one chunk at a time is going to depend on your organization, and we're going to get into the factors that influence the chunks, so to speak, that your organization will take at a time. But nonetheless, regardless of your organization, you should be taking a methodological approach to getting to that inspirational D&I utopia, if you will. So what we've seen in the past with D&I is sort of this one blast, one and done effort. If you're good, quote unquote, you may do that one blast once a year or twice a year, and that has tended to look like a simple training class or a sensitivity session, or things of that nature. But what we have been realizing, many of us before, but what the world is now realizing, is that the diversity, equity, and inclusion issues that exist, at least within the country of the United States, and I know it exists many other places, but I'm going to speak specifically of the U.S., knowing that more intimately, that these are very systemic issues, very deeply ingrained issues that require systemic solutions, holistic solutions that address not just the topical skill set of people, but the practices, the institutions themselves, the policies, the culture, representation, a holistic effort. If you truly want to transform to be a healthy D&I organization, and that if is obviously there because we always have that choice. So now what you see is specifically an organization diversity, equity, and inclusion maturity model, and this shows pretty much a journey that you would take as an organization to get to that sustained level, what I call D&I utopia, so to speak. Let me qualify by saying there are very few organizations at that sustained level. Do I say that to discourage you from aiming at it? Absolutely not. I believe that every organization should be aiming there. But I say it in a sense of showing how much work every organization truly has to do to make a systemic transformative difference. While not reading this in entirety, you can look at it, obviously yourself at your own leisure. The theme that you will see here is an organization graduating from a basic level, a level that is purely reactive, that is solely concerned with DE and or I for reasons of compliance, legality, lack of liability. That's your, basement, if you will, rock bottom level of D&I within an organization. And then you can go all the way to the sustained level, the most graduated level. And at that level, quite frankly, it's not about external effort, as you will see more so within these medium areas of awareness, appreciate, and integrate. Once you get to the sustained level, your organization is DE&I. It is ingrained in the culture. It is institutionalized. So it's not about it being this separate entity. If you were to change the D&I within your organization, you would change the culture. If you were to lose D&I, you would lose some of your organization's culture. That's what that sustained level looks like. And in between there, it's really a focus of going from, appreciating the importance of D&I, valuing it, to hiring other people on the outside to help you to do it, to aiming to do it inside, to holding people accountable for it, and then ultimately getting to that sustained point of it being institutionalized and a significant part of who your organization is, what your organization is. So in any transformational effort, and we're specifically speaking to organization diversity, equity, and inclusion right now, what you will see is steps that should be taken, methodological steps that should be taken in order to successfully transform in the way that your organization desires to, because every organization is different. So what I would argue is there are some essential steps that you need to take in order to do it right. So first and foremost, there needs to be a burning platform. And what does burning platform mean? That basically means there's either a danger to not changing, the house is on fire, so to speak, or it's a danger of what you will miss out on if you do not transform with this diversity, equity, and inclusion. Every organization that takes on the endeavor of transforming their diversity, equity, and inclusion emphasis within their organization may have different burning platforms. Some may be similar, some may be different. For some organizations, it may be an issue of liabilities. They're tired of, facing legal liabilities connected to discrimination, things of that nature. Other organizations, it may be a lack of ability to recruit good candidates. So that may be their reason. Another organization's burning platform may be more positive. It may be because they strive to be an organization that provides the best for their customers. An organization that provides a diverse, collaborative, innovative, integral part within the organization, and that may be their burning platform. The reasons, also known as the burning platform, the strong reasons, if you will vary. Another essential component is for your organization to have a vision that is strong, closely tied to what you want to seek. And this includes the goals, of course, the goals that are tied to your vision, which is also equally important. So what does that look like? From a vision perspective, it's about the appropriate communication, from the perspective of, is it simple and is it well focused so that someone can easily understand what you are attempting to attain? In accord with that, is it communicable? Meaning that you can communicate it in a way where people understand. Is it imaginable? This begs the question, obviously this is subjective, but for your organization, can people imagine this vision actually happening? Or is your culture so far from that vision that they can't even imagine your organization getting there? Very importantly, is it desirable? Is the vision desirable? Meaning, do you have enough of the right stakeholders? And you would know what the right stakeholders are, people who have influence within the organization, who are needed by the organization, who desire this vision, who desire to upgrade, if you will, your DE and or I efforts and feasibility. Is it shown to be doable? Is it shown to be a feasible response? Meaning, when you compare it to other alternatives, does it make sense? Have you done your due diligence regarding how it's actually going to happen? And then lastly, a very important one is flexibility, being flexible. Is your organization flexible enough now in the vision to take it on, while knowing a vision is not an implementation plan, but flexible enough to adapt in order to be successful in it? Because anytime we do something new, there are going to be unexpected occurrences. And when that happens, it's important for us to be flexible enough to pivot in order for what we seek to be successfully implemented. So we went into the importance of a burning platform, the importance of having a vision and what that good vision looks like and goals. And then there are your alternatives. Now, people will often argue if you truly have A as a goal, you don't want to talk about B and C because that discourages you from focusing on A. And what I would argue is that you do want to talk about B and C. Even if you ultimately are committed to A, you want to understand B and C because, for one, it will make your plan A better because you may include some elements of B and C with A. And secondly, you want to understand the skepticism that is within your organization. If there are people who have alternative suggestions, you want to understand their needs so that you can address them with whatever you commit to. And you want to understand them to manage resistance to change, which often comes when there are those desired alternatives. So that is a very important reason to address your alternatives. You want to ensure you have sponsors. That is another very important step in building your diversity, equity, and or inclusion transformation strategy. Sponsors are those individuals who do just that. They sponsor the effort. That is, they have enough power and resources to make the effort happen. The effort may not happen without those sponsors. Those sponsors are often most likely the top leaders of the organization. They are the ones who, when they grab the microphone, people will listen to, and they also the ones who tend to have the purse strings. So whether it's the CFO or the director or the CEO, it's obviously the most desired. These are very important sponsors to have, because while we often love to cheerlead and desire that whole change from the middle up, and it does happen, when we work with transformational change, we know that typically change is not successful without those top level sponsors. And then importantly, in accord with that, very related to that, we want to ensure that we understand the investment level of our transformation. And investments is not just talking about money, which of course is a very important one, but it's also talking about the time investment, which oftentimes equals money, that is going to be required by different stakeholders. We're talking about the investment of people, not from just a staffing perspective, but from the perspective of if there are different desires and opinions, there is that people element, if you will, that can either go up with engagement and satisfaction, or it can go down. Now, what is well known with most transformational changes is that our people engagement, our people satisfaction oftentimes go down before it goes up. Now, why is that? It's because oftentimes there is anxiety related to change. We want to resist it because it is unknown to us. So we are uncertain regarding whether or not it's going to benefit us, and it may be even a possibility that we think it may hurt us. So part of that investment for any transformation, and D&I is not an exception, is that investment, that cost, if you will, of that people factor. Now, if it is the right change, which I believe D&I is, that investment will be well invested and worth the ROI that comes. The ROI will be well worth the investment, rather. And so what you will get in the long end, that more innovation, greater collaboration, greater customer suitability is going to be worth that short run discomfort, if you will, investment that you may experience. And then, of course, there are other investments. Technology is a great example. A lot of times in this day and age, technology tends to accompany most transformations. That is because there are technologies that tend to make our lives, our work better in every area. So usually if you are administering a transformation, there is an upgrade in technology that is at least available, and then you decide whether or not it's worth making that investment. But at the bottom line, you want to ensure that you do understand the investments that will be required for the level of the vision that you are aspiring to and that your organization is aspiring to. Very similar to the sponsors, you want to ensure that you are choosing the appropriate team strategically to work toward this transformational effort for diversity, equity, and or inclusion. The team is consisting of people, of course, who are influential. They're subject matter experts, either in D and or I, as well as in other areas of the organization, because in order to institutionalize D and or I within these different areas of your organization, you need to have the subject matter experts of those respective areas engaged, whether that is marketing or IT, or if that is the overall business strategy area, human resources, of course. All these areas need to be integrated within D&I, and so they need to be very well involved. And now a very important and big piece of the strategy is the cultural approach. And of course, that is covering quite a few things. So when you look at the cultural approach, specifically, we're talking about various elements, various decisions that need to be made. And so one of those decisions, as you can see here, is specifically about how you're going to roll out the transformation. And that is tied to who your organization is, which is tied to the culture, of course. So one is your organization highly centralized, where everything is decided upon and rolled out at the center, or is it highly decentralized? Whereas all of these different areas, perhaps you have different offices around the world, different continents. And if it's a highly decentralized organization, that means there's a lot of power in these different locations, if you will. So given that, there's a lot more diplomacy that needs to take place, a lot more effort of alignment that needs to take place when you have a decentralized operation. Now, of course, there are significant benefits in a decentralized organization, but you do want to keep in mind that extra effort that is going to be tied to rolling out a transformation, because it will be not just one transformation, but it will be several transformations at all of these different hubs, if you will, that you have within your organization. Part of that cultural approach deals with whether your organization is hierarchical or consensus based. Is it an organization that has to decide together about everything, or does the leader just drive it down and then it's one and done? So that's going to be a very important component to consider. Is your organization one that is mature with change, whereas you can basically roll out the vision completely up front, or is it so immature with change and risk averse that you have to take more of a snowball effort, introducing little by little? These are things that you want to take in mind and consider as well, as part of what your culture is and how that approach ties to what you will be getting done. So one thing that is part of the cultural approach is the timing, right? So that's very closely tied to the cultural approach. And timing is different. As I mentioned about the change maturity of your organization, that is going to have a huge impact on what that timing looks like. Whether it's an incremental or radical change, as I mentioned, or is it something even that you're ready to do now immediately, or are there certain prerequisites your organizations have to do culturally in order to implement later? Is this going to be a slow implementation because your organization needs to build the capacity up, or the skills, or the resources, or it's just not used to fast change culturally? Or is it going to be a fast change, one where your organization is ready to pivot, they are nimble, and they have great capacity and resources and a high level of change maturity? Is it going to be a transformation that is flexible, whereas you're learning as you go and you admit, that you're not necessarily 100% sure how this vision is going to be implemented? Or is it one that is more inflexible, whereas leadership is staunch on specific things happening and definitely not open to varying from that? And lastly, as far as timing, what is your organization's tolerance for individual transitioning? This is very important because you have organizations that are like night and day from each other. And even within organizations, while you have shared cultures, you still have a great diversity of individuals within an organization. And they transition differently. They progress differently. They learn differently. They adjust differently. And so your organization has to decide what is going to be your tolerance for individual transitioning. If there's an individual who is stuck in his or her own ways, what is your tolerance or patience level for those types of individuals? These are elements that need to be decided. And then lastly, you want to make sure that whatever assumptions that do exist up front are shared in a transparent way. And this will help to prevent confusion, reduce the level of confusion. It will help also to be prepared for what obstacles or challenges may happen through the transformation toward more diversity, equity, and inclusion. Certain examples of assumptions include: will your business model change? Will your systems, technology change? Will the processes change? Will your departments be reorganized? Or will your workforce need to be augmented because you don't have the right skill sets inside? How will your employees need to be trained? What are the dollar limits? We may say, oh, we absolutely want this to happen. We're absolutely behind it. But we need to know, well, how much money are we truly willing to commit? And similar to that, how much time are we truly willing to commit to this effort? These types of assumptions, if they exist, they need to be well communicated, well aligned, so that people can work together in a healthy, collaborative way. So these are very important components that go into a healthy transformation for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, achieving holistic DE&I is a transformational shift. It's not a lightweight move. It's definitely not just a training class or a session. And it's something that you want to do in a very methodical, rigorous way so that it can make a truly important and beneficial impact for your organizations. If you do have any questions regarding this topic, feel free to email me, and I will provide some answers for that. If you have found this masterclass helpful, please do share it with others, and have a phenomenal day.